Well, greetings to each of you, and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown podcast about corrections, for corrections, and by corrections. I am your host, Aaron Dawson. Good to be back with you again. I hope you enjoyed our interview, our conversation with Mr. Josh Arnold last week. Tickled to death to have him on again. This week, looking forward to another conversation with him, continuing to discuss sharpening skills. And guys, as we talk about sharpening skills, one of the best ways for us to make sure that our skills are staying sharp is to expose ourselves to training from a variety of instructors about a variety of topics. And one place that you can find that type of training is at JailCon, the conference that NIJO hosts. They have 3 of them a year. Excuse me. The first is in JailCon West, held in Arizona. For this year, JailCon West is already done, but still coming up at the end of this month. You have JailCon South, August 28th through 30th, down in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And then JailCon Central, October 24th to the 26th in French Lick, Indiana. So if you've never attended JailCon and you're curious, go to jailtraining.org, check that information out. You can get registered, find all the information you need right there. I will tell you, you come to a JailCon and it will make a difference for you. You will thoroughly enjoy the opportunity, and if nothing else, it's a chance to get away for a little while, but also to expose yourselves to great training, but also to interact with other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing on a daily basis, facing the same struggles, facing the same difficulties, facing the same challenges that you do on a daily basis. It's real easy for us to become insular and kind of feel like, well, we're the only ones that deal with this. We're the only ones that confront this. We're the only ones that fight this battle. And then you get to a place like JailCon, and you're talking to people from other states, from other agencies, and you realize, you know what? We all fighting the same battle, and you're able to encourage each other and talk to each other and be like, well, hey, we were facing that challenge in our agency, and we tried this and it worked pretty well, and compare notes and there are people that I still talk to and interact with today that I've met at JailCons, and so I've thoroughly enjoyed every JailCon I have the opportunity to attend, and I know that you will too. So check that out, jailtraining.org, and look. You can follow the tabs for JailCon. Want to make mention before we jump in our interview today, guys, if you're enjoying the podcast, get the word out. Let people know. It makes a big difference when somebody hears about it coming from somebody who's enjoying it and say, hey, you need to check this out. So get the word out there and let them know if there's some topics that you'd like for us to cover. If there's some questions that maybe you'd like for us to answer. Man, I'd be tickled to death. We'd be tickled to death to do it. So you can shoot us an email at shakedown@jailtraining.org, and we would love the opportunity to hear from you. But as I mentioned earlier, tickled to death to have again on the podcast Mr. Josh Arnold. Looking forward to this conversation with him, and I know that it'll be enjoyable and it'll be beneficial. So guys, without further ado, let's jump into that interview. All right. Well, as promised, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Mr. Josh Arnold. Tickled to death have him on again. Hope that you enjoyed the conversation last week. I know I did, and I forgot to mention something that everybody needs to be aware of, Josh.
All right.
They should be impressed with your work record. They should be impressed with your professionalism. But one thing I don't know that many people realize is that for a large portion of your career, you were stuck working with Sean Stewart.
I was.
and that is impressive. I want to give credit where it is due. I mean, don't want to miss that.
I appreciate your condolences. Yes, I I have had the pleasure of working with Sean Stewart for quite a while, and NIJO contracts out with him quite often. And he is, I thought when I retired from the sheriff's department, I got rid of him, but that hasn't been the case.
Absolutely not.
He is still nothing but a whisper away. He is always there. He's the fungus you can't get rid of.
That's it. Yeah, when Jesus said, "Take up your cross," you had no idea that meant Sean. I mean, that's just
exactly. And it has been a heavy cross to bear.
Well, if nothing else, this will give me enough. This will let me know if Sean's paying attention to what we're doing on this podcast.
Well, we'll know if Sean watches for sure.
But anyway, to more important topics, we were talking about last week. Based on your opportunities you've had to do, whether it's inspections or accreditations or whatever the case may be, facilities all over the country, not just your personal experience in, the agency in which you worked, but all across the country, and talking about things that you have noticed, that when you're, especially what we were talking about last week, when you're running short staffs, you're running on bare minimum, and you're prioritizing in the heat of the moment of, this is the loudest wheel, so we're going to grease this one.
Right.
How do you decide which skills have to be maintained? And I appreciated the point that you brought out about, that constantly playing that what if game, but we kind of focused primarily on line officers last time. But, I think that that if there's a component of corrections that gets hit the hardest, it's the supervisors and the administrators. And what I mean by that is, as a supervisor, as an administrator, you're responsible for the facility, for the people that are on your shift or that you're responsible for, the inmates, all of which you have minimal control over. In a perfect environment, if you were fully staffed, right, every spot was filled, in a perfect environment, that'll make your hair, turn gray or turn loose, whichever the case may be. But now when you're talking about people being short-staffed, often you've got supervisors that are having to not only worry about who's where and who's doing what, but they're having to plug holes themselves and bounce from pillar to post, which, if they're doing the job, that means they're not supervising the ones that are doing the job, because they're doing it. So,
right,
in light of that, that puts another layer, if you will, of pressure on them. So I was curious if, again, as you've been in different facilities, toured different facilities, what were some things, maybe from a supervisor's or an administrator's perspective, that some skills that you noticed, and again, not trying to be derogatory or critical at all, just you're an outside observer, and so you don't know, you don't have it. It's not your circus, not your monkeys. You don't have a dog in the fight, so you can kind of see right away, oh man, that's going to be a problem. What were some of those things that maybe we got supervisors, administrators listening, they can say, you know what, I might need to check on that.
Right. Well, for one, Aaron, you brought up a great point yourself. Around the country, and I have seen this in numerous facilities, is when they're as short-staffed as people are, you have supervisors doing the job as corrections officers, and it is taking place almost everywhere. You have corporals and sergeants, not just for part of the shift, not just for 1 or 2 days a week, but sometimes on a full-time basis. They are having to do the duties of a corrections officers, again, just to keep that facility's head above water. And
right.
And that's, now, how am I expect that first line supervisor to supervise, to be responsible for corrections officers, for holding people accountable and making sure how do I expect that to happen as a jail administrator if I'm having to do the work as an officer all the time? It just doesn't add up. And again, we tend to, we talked about this last week with the duct tape and WD-40. we just tend to make things happen. We just tend to do it. We just tend, and an office and a first line supervisor, you want to pat the back on a first line supervisor who's willing to, roll up his shirt sleeves and help out when things get busy or things get tight. That is a good quality in a first line supervisor. But you don't want to put first line supervisors in a situation where they have to do the work as a corrections officer, because there is not enough staff to even make the operation go without them working as a corrections officer. And those are some of the things that I'm seeing around the country. And again, I've always said, Aaron, and I think you've heard me say it before, the heartbeat of every corrections facility is those first line supervisors.
Right.
They are so important. They are so, as your first line supervision goes, so goes your first line, so goes your facility. And so if you've got rock solid, great leaders in your first line supervisors, you're going to have a good run in jail. You just are. It is so important that those first line supervisors doing their job. One of the as far as job performance, when they don't have to do those corrections officers' duties, when they don't, the biggest problem I see around the country in first line supervisors is there are a lot of first line supervisors out there that are more interested in being buddies and being everybody's friend rather than being a real supervisor. Going and correcting bad performance, going and making sure that the job is getting done correctly. There are a lot of supervisors out there in corrections that are worried much more about their popularity, about not offending their friends or their buddies, and those things. They kind of hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and that's a big problem in corrections. I always encourage, when you're a first line supervisor, when you're your roles, your responsibilities change, and you're a sergeant, or a corporal. That's your craft, that's what they're paying you to do, and it's a lot of responsibility. You can't be worried about being liked all the time. You have to go in there and you have to make sure that the job's getting done correctly. And there's a way you can do that without ruffling feathers. And then there are those times where you need to ruffle some feathers. Something especially when you're looking at that officer that knows doggone well the right way to do it, but they're just not doing it. That's the time where you gotta ruffle some feathers, and it might not be such a pleasant conversation. And so that's kind of some of the big commonalities that I see with first line supervision, around the country. And I've seen some great first line supervisors, throughout too. There's some really good ones out there, some ones that are really inspiring. But when we talk about one of the things that jails don't do enough of is I tell you, Aaron, when I made sergeant, I was a corrections officer for 8 years, before I decided to promote to sergeant, because I was kind of scared of the responsibility. I knew it was a lot. And so, I took it real seriously. And so, but when I made sergeant, man, they took me to this one day course in what to do when you're a sergeant, how to check people's timesheets and how to do those administrative things. Then they handed me a set of keys and said, "Go to it, Sergeant Arnold," and that was it. No leadership, very little leadership training, very little, in the ways of conflict management, those types of skills. And those skills are important. We're not all born leaders. I'm sure I definitely wasn't at any point in time. So, and those skills are really important for agencies to hone in, because again, we talk about, recruitment and retention, and recruitment is important, but my gosh, retention, keeping those officers that have the experience, that have the knowledge and the know-how, that can teach those new officers coming in. Staff retention is so critical. And and your corrections officers, they'll stick around longer if they have good leaders leading them. If
Right.
those first line supervisors, are taught how to be good leaders, are taught some conflict management, you're going to keep those officers, that you have. And again, sometimes it's about the money, but it isn't all about the money. It really isn't.
Right.
So providing that training and providing those things to your first line supervisors is really important, because again, sometimes and I used to have brand new sergeants were treating my corrections officers like they used to inmates, because that's the only type of supervision they knew. That's the only
Yes.
it's the only thing that ever supervised was inmates. So why was it going to be any different when they made sergeant? They were treating my officers like they were inmates.
Yes.
You hear, go lock down. You're like, oh man, something's going on. So that's
Yeah.
and so it's important to get them good positive resources, and that's not, and especially as short staffed as facilities are, training is suffering. Training is really, really suffering. And again, it's, you don't want to wait as a facility to address these issues when that notice of claim hits your door, because
Right.
almost every lawsuit has something in it that says failure to train or failure to supervise. And I can tell you, if your first line supervisors are spending all their time being corrections officers and not supervising,
Right.
you are wide open for a failure to supervise claim. You're wide open. And again, and facilities, sheriffs, jail administrators don't realize it until, again, that sergeant's, sitting in that chair being deposed by a plaintiff's attorney. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
why didn't you know? And it's like, well, I was pulling tray carts serving chow at the time. I was being a corrections officer, and
Yeah.
that's not the point where you want to find out.
No. And it's interesting, you talking about the importance of people moving into that leadership role and them getting and I think you and I have discussed, every time I have the opportunity to train, to teach, around the country, most of the time the topics that I'm dealing with are leadership based. I mean, that's fundamentally, and I've kind of made it a research project, if you will, to ask how many supervisors are in the room. And usually it's, I'd say 50 to 80% of them, hands go up. And I'll ask them, okay, all right, of you that are supervisors, how many of you, when you were promoted, received training specific to leadership as a part of that promotion process? And I'll tell you, Josh, a group as small as 15, 20 people to a group, 70, 80, 90, 100 people, I've never had more than 3 hands go up in the room. And and it's the first couple of times I'm thinking, it just kind of, I mean, that's kind of pitiful. Now it's almost to the point where it's not funny, but it's almost funny, because I'm thinking, oh wow, okay, that makes more sense now why you're seeing some of the things that that we're seeing. But so incredibly crucial, because it's a different skill set. It's
absolutely
totally different skill set.
Absolutely.
And I was blessed to have, the opportunity to work in education before I got involved in corrections. So I've always joked and said, it's the same speeches, just the people got bigger.
Right.
But again, it's that kind of a skill set, a mindset of, okay, how do I motivate these people to do what they need to do, to encourage them, whether that's a positive encouragement or the kind that involves throwing chairs or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And that is definitely a skill set that, that there are good leadership trainings out there, correction specific, but I'd encourage, any folks that are listening to this, that, with the internet today, there are so many resources out there. I mean, you Google leadership training or, leadership principles, you're going to have thousands of resources right there at your fingertips that are going to give you at least some very basic principles of, okay, this is what you need to do here. This is how you need to talk to people. This is, setting goals or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
That are available. And And the truth is, if you do not have good leadership, like you said, the heart and soul of the facility, you don't have to tell anybody that you have a leadership issue. When they walk in the door, either way, positive or negative, it's obvious whether or not leadership's on point or there's a gap there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, Aaron. And again, one of the, and we wonder why our turnover is so bad
Sure.
sometimes. And again, a lot of it has to do with that leadership of the first line supervisors. There was a situation, and Sean could tell you, Sean Stewart and I, both had to deal with this situation. Was we always those people who put in their 2-week notice, they'll always be honest with you on an exit interview. They've got no dog in the fight anymore. So
Right.
again, Sean and I always interviewed those folks that were leaving, and we'd say, hey, why are you leaving? And even if it was, oh, I'm going back to school, or I'm joining the military, or I'm going to be
Right.
I'm hitting the road as a deputy, or whatever, we'd ask him, well, what was good about working here? What was bad about working here? Where can we make some improvements? And we got, and again, we look for those trends. We look for those, commonalities amongst people that were walking away. And we had a few officers that quit, and they were really new officers. And that hurts. That really hurts. And so you sit him down and you say, hey, what was the issue? And he goes, hey, look, I've been here. I've been here 4 months, and I already know that if I don't go to this sergeant's house every weekend for barbecues or pal around with him and his guys, I'm always going to get a rotten post, a rotten assignment. I'm never going to get ahead. I'm never going to get, because this sergeant just takes care of his boys and his people and everybody else. And it's like, and listen, man, I'm just not going to tolerate it. And we're coming up with a generation of worker right now that's coming into the workforce. There are lots of jobs out there. There's lots of choices, and again, if somebody's going to show poor leadership or obvious favoritism, they're just going to walk away, and that's what we had. And so, Sean Stewart and I got together, and it's like, Sean, are you hearing this? And he, yeah, you hear it once, you say, oh, okay, well, you got to take it into consideration, but it might just be somebody, that's disgruntled, or this job isn't for them. But where there's smoke, there's fire. When you hear it 2 or 3 or 4 times, and okay, there's something here. And then, Sean and I looked, and we obviously there was a clique we needed to break up. And so we broke the clique up and made sure that sergeant wasn't in charge of the schedule anymore, and sat that sergeant down and gave him pointed instruction on expectations in the future, and hopefully solve that problem.
Right. Yes. Well, and that I something you just said that really I thought just kind of jumped out at me. As an administrator, for those administrators that are listening, that was an awesome opportunity for you and for Sean with that sergeant that, in their mind, they may have been doing it completely on purpose, and they had their favorite. They could have that. Sure, that could be the case. But it could also be, you know what? I want people, the mindset could be, I want people I can trust to work these positions. And these people, we interact. I know them. I know how they think. I know how they operate. So I can trust them. This guy, he kind of keeps himself over there. He keeps himself distant. He's not interested in being involved. So I don't know him. I don't trust him. So I'll just stick him there. And not even realize that you've created this divide.
Right.
That's eating your shift alive. But to have the opportunity to sit down and say, hey, look, intentional or unintentional, here's a result. So we've got to fix this. That, as an administrator, the responsibility to, sure, yes, you want your guys to be trained, but a lot of that training can be sitting across the desk from each other.
Oh, absolutely.
That I can invest in this supervisor. The I always joke when I started with Morgan County, and when I was interviewing with the warden, he asked me what my ultimate goal was. And I told him, I said, well, I said, if this is where I need to be, I said, to be honest with you, I said, your chair. And he laughed. Well, it took a few years, but eventually I got there. And
you
so
got there.
I got there, and then we were doing sergeant interviews. And one of the applicants for the sergeant position, I asked her that question. I said, okay, I said, you want to be a sergeant? I said, so what are your ultimate goals? You know, what do you want to accomplish? And she kind of paused, and I said, no, go ahead, whatever it is. She said, your chair. And I couldn't help but just laugh. And I thought, you know what? That's not the first time that's been said in this office. Yeah. Now, currently she's a lieutenant, so who knows? The future has, future's still there. But anyway,
absolutely.
But the thought process of, okay, now that I know that's what she wanted, all right, you want that position? Here's some things you got to know. Here's some things you need to be good at. But it gave me the opportunity to invest in that individual. And where I'm going with this is that, I looked at the other sergeants. Wait a minute. Am I investing in them? She said she wanted this position, but what about that one? They may not want to be the warden. They may think I'm right where I want to be, right where I need to be. I'm a sergeant. That's what I do. Okay. Well, I need to invest in them as well.
And that's what's important, especially for a jail administrator, Aaron, is to go and look at your talent. Take a look at those supervisors. Take a look at who's got the right stuff, and start encourage your lieutenants to take some sergeants under their wing. You can take some lieutenants or captains or whatever your rank structure may be. Take a person or two. You should always, when you retire and decide to hang it up, and there should always be somebody ready waiting in the wings, and that should be part of your responsibility, to make sure that there's somebody good to take your place, that you've gotten ready. And so that's really important to do, and part of that process is identifying the people with the right stuff, because again, just like it takes a special person to be a corrections officer, not no regular Joe off the street can do the job. It takes a lot of this, and it takes a lot of this.
Yes.
It's the same thing for supervisors and for administrators, and that part. You got to have folks that can lead people, that can teach, that can be that type of leader that the facility needs to be successful.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Josh, I think that is a fantastic way to wrap this up. I'll throw an amen at the end of that, and we will
absolutely.
Well, guys, I hope that was beneficial and encouraging to you. And guys, I tell you, one thing I've always appreciated about Josh is the fact that even facing a negative situation, I don't know, I've never been inside his head, but even facing a negative situation, he is always upbeat with it. And so this whole conversation, we started last week with, man, jails are short-staffed, but all the way through it's been, you know what? It may be the case. Put a positive spin on it. Here's what we can do. Let's not worry about what we can't do. Here's what we can do. So I know you bring that to the table naturally, but I just want you to know that it was recognized and appreciated, so that,
Well, Aaron, much thanks, sir. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, good deal. Well, again, Josh, I appreciate the time and the opportunity to be on with you.
Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. And guys, as I say every time, there's something that questions, thoughts, concerns, potential topics you think you'd like us to cover, shoot us an email, shakedown@jailtraining.org. You want to send your condolences to Josh for the whole Sean thing, you can send it there as well. We'll make sure he gets it. Absolutely. But guys, in the meantime, as always, stay sharp, stay safe, stay vigilant. Godspeed.